So we're going live now.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, What's the Deal? Updates on the UK-EU trade agreement brought to you by British Romanian Chamber of Commerce. I am Anastasia, Event and Marketing Coordinator, and I will be your host for today. If last week we've discussed about double taxation and its implications for both Romania and the UK, today we're debating another important treaty, which is the UK-EU trade agreement. The trade deal was finally agreed on Christmas Eve last year and came into effect when the transition period finished on New Year's Eve, and is considered to be the largest trade ever signed by the EU. I'm very glad to introduce our panelists for today, all of them British, by the way. Michael McNair, CEO and founder of Forum Financial Advisory and Training Solutions, with great experience in financial and investigative services. Dr. Raymond Davis, Senior International Strategist with top-level international supply chain experience, and Neil McGregor, who's not only our chairman, but he's a managing partner of McGregor and Partners and a non-executive director of Furkai Winery. Gentlemen, welcome. We are really curious to learn more about what happened in the latest months since the treaty came into effect and its implications for both Romania and the UK. And Michael, I think I will start with you.
Thank you very much, Anna. Thank you very much, Neil, as well, for inviting me to talk today at the British Romanian Chamber of Commerce. And yes, Anna, we're going to speak about the UK-EU trade agreement. And of course, it's very involved, but it's at a glance, as I put here. And if we could just move to the next slide and as well, please, and then the third. As you can see, the United Kingdom has left the European Union. And from what I understand, 52% of the United Kingdom population, that's England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, just to name some of the countries within the Union, voted to leave the EU a number of years ago now, so it seems. And they stated the following were the reasons, the main reasons: economics. And of course, that's going to play a big factor in our talk today, especially with Britain and Romania being heavily involved within Europe. Then comes political elitism as well. Well, why do they want that? They wanted, as it links into the next point there, sovereignty. The thing is that Britain wanted, whether you agree with it or not, Britain wanted to have some of their laws, some of the laws back to Westminster rather than being made in Europe. So that is part of it. And of course, the sovereignty, they wanted to have control over all of the economics, the politicians, the lawmaking, and make it back 100% to the UK. So if we can move to the next slide. So the impact on the UK and EU businesses. Well, this is going to be a huge factor. I come originally from Dover, which is in southeast Kent, southeast England, and of course I used to be working. I started my working life at the port in Dover, and of course there's a lot of trade and business going through the docks, and of course nearby at Folkestone to Calais with the Channel Tunnel. So I'm aware of the huge impact of UK business and indeed EU business together. So let me just move on to this. So if they want to export goods to the European markets, there are certain things that have to be done now. Certain things will have to be completed in a slightly different method, which we'll come on to a little bit later. So the EU and UK law will require businesses presence should there be any disputes over payments and customs charges compliance post beginning of this year. So what that means is that if you have a UK business and you want to export to the EU, you then have to have a presence in the EU for tax purposes, because if there's any, as it says there, any disputes over payments or any customs charges, then it's easier to comply. And of course, you then have your customers within the EU as well. So EU companies do not want to have any additional risk or cost for the customs compliance, and nor, as we used to have in the UK, freight agents, which did all the paperwork for you for a small charge, of course, but they don't want to get involved due to liability. So EU companies want their goods delivered directly to the warehouse without any responsibility undertaken by the responsibility, sorry, undertaken by the UK exporter. So they don't want to have the hassle. It's already done by the UK business. And of course, there's two sides to every coin. The same applies in reverse. When the EU businesses wish to export to the UK, they will have to have a presence within the United Kingdom as well, for much the same reasons. They have to declare the paperwork and all of their customs liabilities. And I'll give you one example. Going back down to Dover again, it's one of the busiest ports in the world, especially with freight nowadays. And of course, when the lorries come down from London or from the rest of the country to go back over to the continent, they have to clear the paperwork and make sure that everything is in place before they get anywhere near Dover, because you can imagine the hassle with the local system there on the roads. So, and of course, businesses on both sides must be prepared to change, to be established, and also to maintain business records and have technical staffing resources. Otherwise, they will not be allowed to submit any customs documents, and then, of course, there's no trade. So it's a big impactive way of doing things that has to be changed. People have to be flexible. So moving on to the next slide, which should be about trade. So what does the deal say? There's a lot, and of course, going through the documents, you know, about the trade deal, there's lots that needs to be covered, and of course, all of the trade deals there have to go through the European Parliament to be ratified as well as the UK Parliament. So, what does the deal say? The main points that I believe are there will be no taxes on goods or tariffs, if you like, or limits on the amount that can be traded between the UK and EU from the 1st of January. I believe that's a very good thing for both sides. Some new checks will be introduced at borders, such as safety checks and customs declarations. And of course, the main point there is customs declarations, because when a business goes over to the continent from the UK, there are various things that have to be checked. Yes, the safety, and there's the Aviation and Maritime Security Act as well, where they can do on spot checks on the vehicles that go over. So that is part of one of the existing checks, but of course, customs declarations, as we said, will have to be done before you get to the port. Unfortunately, there will be some new restrictions. Certain UK animal food product restrictions on food products. For example, and I'll give you one example about this, which there's lorry drivers obviously have their sandwiches and things like this in their cabs, and they were stopped when they entered Holland, and they had their lunch, their sandwiches seized, which seems a bit petty, but the example here is uncooked meat like sausages and burgers can't enter the EU unless they're frozen to a depth of -18 degrees centigrade. Of course, with the businesses, they have the freezer lorries, so that's already covered, but of course it does impact, unfortunately, on everyday life as well. So having a deal in place means that the fear that we all had, what's going to happen? How will we cope? What's going to happen? And it wasn't just it was from the British and EU perspective. No one knew. Businesses were up in the air, and when eventually it came down to earth on the 24th of December on Christmas Eve, I think everyone thought it a nice Christmas present that actually it had been done and that there was going to be a deal. Because imagine the nightmare with no deal. That's my personal view. However, businesses still need to prepare for new procedures at the port and new paperwork, as we mentioned. So moving on to services and qualifications. Businesses offering services such as banking, architecture, accounting will lose their automatic rights of access to the EU markets and will face some extra restrictions. this will be also impactful on qualifications of people. For example, there will be no automatic recognition on professional qualifications for people such as doctors, chefs, architects, for example, in both the UK and the EU. I find that a little bit hard, to swallow, because I think, well, put it this way, that you have to, if, for example, you're coming from the UK to Romania and you have the qualifications that you would have had beforehand, and I had a little bit of a personal example of this. I tried to do one thing and had my qualifications from the UK, but they said because of Brexit, you can't, it has to be ratified here. So it's a bit of a slower process. So what does this mean? Rather than following one set of rules for the whole of the EU, UK businesses will need to comply with individual countries' regulations. So, for example, you have all of the EU countries is about 26 or so, and of course, you'll have to do that individually. It'll be harder for people with qualifications going to the UK to sell their services in the EU. Individuals will need to check each country's rules, as we mentioned before, and make sure that that qualification is equal in that country as well. And the UK and the EU have pledged to keep talking to try and improve access for these services in the future, which I think is very good in that they will do this, and hopefully that will be done soon to make sure that people know what's happening. Of course, with COVID, with Brexit, online businesses have soared, in popularity. So, for example, we're doing this webinar now, and sometimes in the past now we would do it live. Perhaps have an evening together, have the talk, and then have a bit of networking afterwards. So, lots of this has all gone online, and some of it is very good. But however, what's the impact from the subject that we're talking about here today? So under the new rules, European companies must directly pay UK sales tax or VAT on sales under the value of £135, which is roughly equivalent, excuse my maths if it didn't work out, 155 euros or 190 US dollars. So they now have to register and file quarterly declarations with the equivalent UK authorities and vice versa as well. Again, more paperwork. If a UK customer buys directly from an EU business with purchases over £135, the customer is responsible for paying that VAT once the product arrives in the UK. Some people felt that they were, having a high value over £135, just get ordering as much as possible, but they didn't realise that they had to pay the tax as well. So customers expect with online shopping that shipping is free. It's not. And the same applies, as I say, two sides to every coin when the UK businesses selling online to the EU as well. And I looked at 3 examples. There was a German company who said now anything under the £135, they will not deal with at all. They will have above that, yes. A French company and for indoors, they have 20% of the business in the UK. They've had to adapt to this. Okay, so business travel, post-Brexit and COVID. Of course, at the moment, the COVID pandemic has had a huge impact on business travel. In fact, it's not allowed unless there's 3 reasons now why you can leave the UK. If it's really necessary for you to travel and you can't work from home and it's a very important job and it can't be done on a webinar, then you have to have authorities given from the company or the business that you're dealing with. 2 medical reasons, again, authority from the medical establishment you're going to, and of course education, but again from the university and other educational establishments, you have to have that authority. Otherwise you get fined £5,000 for leaving the country, including going to the Republic of Ireland. So it's very impactful, and that's just on the COVID part that's affected the business travel. So let's have a look at Brexit. So UK citizens are now classed as, and I don't want to be disrespectful, outsiders. and must comply with the rules imposed by each member state. For unpaid visits to the EU, such as to attend a meeting or a conference, they are allowed to spend 90 days in every 180 days in the Schengen area without a visa. If a UK citizen starts working for an EU-based company in any of their member states, including Romania, obviously, then, well, that company must endeavour first to find a European Union citizen rather than a UK citizen for that position. They have to have what we call domestic employees from anywhere in the EU. For EU business people, of course, there's also restrictions going to the UK. It's not so stringent, but it's still stringent enough. They are allowed to come up to 6 months for unpaid lectures, conferences, etc. And then they can leave and then come back almost straight away, if you like, for another 6 months. EU business people can work for 1 month visa-free for certain events like conducting lectures, legal advocacy, other business activities require a visa, and certificate of sponsorship from the business employer in the UK. So it's going back a little bit in time to how it was a little bit in the past in the UK. So it's suggested that both UK and the individual EU countries can have a bilateral agreement. And the only bilateral agreement that the UK has, so I understand, things may have changed just recently, is with the Republic of Ireland. So, for example, if you could have one with Romania in the future, maybe, and hopefully. Okay, so moving on, so I'm obviously aware of time. We have an hour and there's another 2 people behind. So trade-in services, just a little bit about this. I just want to touch on 40 exports to the EU are services, so I understand. And post-Brexit transform itself, should the UK transform itself into a trading hub? I think so as well. And for example, Israel is one of those countries, I understand, where services are used as a bridge between 2 trading blocks, 2 trading countries. And you can see, that if the UK positions itself correctly, and it has to be correctly and wisely in the centre of overlapping trade agreements, it can become the link between those countries and blocks that do not have freed trade agreements with each other and benefit from that trade as well. It's important, especially in this day and age, that business is flowing and that you have that business for your country or your business, of course. So it's it's hoped that the EU and the UK to put in place a memorandum of understanding by March 2021, this month. I don't believe that's happened just yet, but this is a framework of cooperation for financial services. And it could have a commitment to a memorandum of understanding. For example, the free trade agreement between the EU and Japan expressed into Commission and the UK HM Treasury in terms of such discounts to each other's financial markets. So very soon and be agreed, but you know how things go in this world with agreements. On an international basis, it really takes a little bit longer, but let's hope that will be soon. I understand Neil's going to have a little talk about the legal sector there when he comes up shortly, so I'll leave anything for Neil in this area. But one other thing I just want to press, we're talking about trading and VATs here, but there's a lot of other things that still will be the same as it was under the European Union. Defence is one thing. A friend of mine works in the Romanian embassy in London, and they deal with the international cooperation on the law enforcement side, and things, instead of going route A, they're going route B. Of course, it's a lot more money, a lot more work to do, but there's a lot of memorandums of understanding between UK and Romania. Anyhow, there's especially with the Metropolitan Police and the police here in Bucharest. So I'll leave that over to you now, Anna, and thank you very much. And if anyone has any questions, my details will be on the end of the slides. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica, very much. This is a very comprehensive presentation and it touched a lot of areas, so thank you so much. I see the chat is very active already, so just so you know, everyone, we will take questions after everyone's presentations. But meanwhile, feel free to enter your question in the Q&A box. And I would like to warmly welcome our audience on Facebook Live, as we are watched by more than 50 people already. Thank you so much, everyone, for being there for us. And now I will go to Dr. Raymond Davis, who's having also a very interesting presentation to show us. Raymond, welcome.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you for the invite. And what a time to be doing the UK-EU trade agreement and the situation that's happening. I did the title page here with, what's the deal, in a sense, we're 3 months in. So what is the deal? How is it operating? And I think that's why I put the question marks in it. What's the deal? But I see it as a huge opportunity for Romania-UK trade opportunity. And I think Michael was presenting a lot of the kind of issues on the paperwork, but presenting really the opportunities that can be. Next slide, please. So I think the best way to understand Brexit is the rebranding of Brexit, and of course it's global Britain, and really to understand what Britain's about now, in a sense, is a bilateral trade policy, and I think Michael's touching on those kind of issues and MOUs and things like that. So the UK is systematically negotiating and establishing free trade agreements globally, otherwise under WTO most favoured nation rule treaty status. And don't underestimate that, because the size of the trade that the UK does with the US is under that treaty and the WTO rules. So the UK-EU trade treaty, in practical terms, since January the 1st, even though it was 11 p.m. on the 31st of December that it came into force here in the UK, it's been interpreted by individual member states differently. And I think Michael was kind of touching on that as well. Therefore, as a reset of the UK's view according to UK trade experiences with individual nations, and I'll bring that up in a little while. Actually, there's a huge advantage to Romania, as it's seen as a regional crossroads. I think I kind of put it forward before in some of the chamber aspects. UK really can have a Black Sea trade strategy centered around Romania. And that is particularly the case because the UK FTA's free trade agreements are in place with the Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, and Turkey. So, that gives you an idea of, and I think Michael was talking about it, those kind of bilateral trade playing a regional type of approach, and Romania being seen really as a Black Sea trade approach. So to understand how many free trade agreements are in place at the moment, I looked it up. We're up to 61 are in place, including Japan, Canada, Mexico, and I've included Switzerland for obvious reasons, with mutual recognition agreements in place with the US, Australia and New Zealand, pending free trade agreements, and India's is pending too, and that's the big focus besides the US for the UK on a free trade agreement is India, and obviously because of the size of that trade opportunity. So there's really an opportunity to use UK bilateral trade policy as a springboard into a whole new trade dynamic for Romania, particularly targeted integration of key sectorial SME supply chains into UK markets. So let's put some context to that. Next slide, please. So global Britain, the opportunity. What I did here was to give some idea. Britain, the United Kingdom, is the world's 5th largest economy. In fact, it's the 5th largest economy importing and exporting, and accounts for about 2.3 global GDP. The European Union's just under 15%. I think that if you go into the basic facts, though, it's really looking at the size of Romania as an economy. Is the UK is 10 times that size, almost 3 trillion market. And that's the way to look at the United Kingdom, I believe. The other aspect is, and I've used the term British Isles, because you have to look at the UK now as in its contingent kind of economic frameworks, which is England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland have devolved economies, so their governments, all in the Northern Ireland, their assembly, are in charge of their economic profile. And England, being by far the largest economy, is even broken up into regional aspects. So that's the way to look at that kind of trade situation, and a huge opportunity in the bilateral trade situation for Romania. Again, if we look at global GDP outside the EU, we're talking close to 82%. And also, if you even look at the Commonwealth of Nations, which Britain has particularly close relationships with, you're talking populations of 2.5 million and 13 trillion of US dollars GDP activity. It's almost Romania can take advantage of that global Britain positioning as it springboards globally into that situation. I would add, if you're into sales, it's almost that 80-20 ratio, with Britain really looking at the 80 and hoping to see how it goes with the EU going forward with the treaty. Next slide, please. So Britain's global perspective for Romania is really looking at the infrastructure opportunities for Romania bilaterally. Romania's transport infrastructure is underdeveloped and needs investment and modernisation. That's something that Britain can come into play fully. I think on the healthcare and life sciences, I'm particularly aware of this as I'm working to focus on that particular aspect. Romania's health system is based on a health insurance model, which gives a lot of flexibility in getting into that market. The country has 368 public and 147 private hospitals. Understand it from the UK side as well. The private sector here is 25% in health, and over 70% in the care sector is private sector. So offering facilities, upgrading facilities, strengthening primary care, digital health services, medical equipment, you can say these bilateral opportunities. Also, I would say huge care sector opportunities for retiring Romanians and Europeans. So I was looking at the census figures on that. So living in the United Kingdom back in 2011, and it's really funny, our census date was literally on Sunday for 2021. So there's close to 84,000 Romanians, and then there's a five-fold increase in that at 2019. So 427,000 Romanians living, working in the UK is huge. Energy sector as well. The energy sector a priority for Romania and economy and security policy, obviously looking to shift towards the green policies, but also huge gas and oil opportunities, and of course Britain going to be involved in that. I think Michael touched more effectively onto the security issues and the defence issues, which I think are huge, and don't underestimate that Britain's just put 24 billion extra, that's 24 billion pounds into defence. And I think the other huge one is absolutely tourism. That's both in traditional tourism and hospitality, but plus recuperative and well-being health as well. So medical tourism is another huge area. I think on the retail side, it's funny how in the pandemic, I'm aware of the shopping malls owners and the tenants looking to work with the Romanian government. So there's all kinds of opportunities there. And of course, the involvement of UK products and into those mix and repositioning of the shopping malls. I think the automotive side is valued at 30 billion. And represents one of Romania's most important economic forces. I think that goes into the industrial side, where Romania has a legacy that can be further developed. As the UK has decided against an industrial strategy to focus on R&D and innovation, that mix could be a huge opportunity in that bilateral trade. And of course, the Industry 4 transformation with cyber physical systems. I think the big one in cybersecurity, the Internet of Things and networks. And that's really about productivity transformation. And I can tell you now that the UK Board of Trade has just presented a report last week about Britain's priorities, and it's up on productivity and the whole cyber side of things. So from a EU perspective, when we go on how the trade treaty is working, the custom formalities, checks and controls and goods are absolutely, I'm afraid, being interpreted by each EU member from their own trade perspectives. And I talk to colleagues that are working really with SMEs and all the rest of it. 3 countries come out really presenting an aggressive barrier approach to trade, sometimes literally zeroing out trade as a result because of the paperwork, the extensive paperwork, and then really kind of going beyond treaty regulations to make sure that paperwork's in place to such a degree it prevents trade. And France, Holland, and Ireland are high on that list, and I think we've seen a lot of press coverage on that. And also Poland's causing issues. The only reason I bring that up, I think, again, as Michael says, this is a unique opportunity for Romania to take advantage and find that bilateral trade. Rules of origin could affect supply chain interpretations, re-evaluations. Again, looking at working with Romania could be the opportunity, and I think the COVID-19 vaccines has highlighted that. VAT and excise duties, I think some of the VAT questions and interpretations, and Michael covered some of those, and I'm sure Neil will have an input on that. I think the recognition of professional qualifications, again, how Romania interprets that could be a barrier or not affecting foreign direct investment by UK companies. So that's really to look at. UK registered companies are seen as a third country. So it opens up re-evaluation to UK to non-EU expansion. We're working with countries like Romania on an integration basis, and at the same time use Romania as an EU base for UK companies, and also a springboard for UK SMEs, and I would say vice versa for Romania with Global Britain. Contracts and the jurisdiction, and of course the whole area of intellectual property rights as well. And it's just great the EU is prepared to look at the memorandum of standards and really find the nitty-gritty how this treaty can work effectively to affect trade. New slide, please. So what I wanted to do is bring you up to date. Well, what's the Britain's EU trade treaty perspective? So what I did was draw out some latest press headlines. And of course, I think we're all aware of the kind of vaccine row that's come up. So, you know, vaccine row shows EU won't respect the rules. And that was in the Times on March 19th. Threats to supplies will only increase the UK's determination to guard against protectionism and reduce reliance on Europe. Again, I think that's supply chain re-evaluation and opportunities for Romania. So the European Commission, of course, threatening to evoke emergency powers to stop and block exports and even requisition of factories. This type of thing is causing a re-evaluation during these first 3 months. It's reaching cabinet level within Britain. So, you know, a quote from a British cabinet minister, they're very angry, and that's the EU Commission, about Brexit and our successful inoculation program. So there's a mix of seeing how this treaty is working out over this 3 months, and these kind of quotes are coming out. The crisis has highlighted how the EU, which sells itself as a rule-based outfit, is prepared to ride roughshod over them in the crisis. These are the things which is Britain's starting to really look at how can we make things work. And I think it's down to the individual nation how they want to make that treaty work. And I think Romania has a positive light on that. So it was really interesting. I got a latest one from yesterday with the Right Honourable William Hague. Remember, he was our ex-Foreign Secretary. He's now Lord Hague. And he's saying the damage being done to future trust and mutual reliance, and that is on the EU. And also looking that Britain will start working with middle ranking powers, not just on the EU side, but also on the US side. So, you know, middle ranking powers like Canada, Japan, Australia. So it's kind of changing the way we're looking at trade, but I think that is where we're looking to work with countries that we know we can work with in the EU, and I put Romania at the top of that list. So the final thing that I found, which is really part of what could be an ongoing negotiation in the treaty aspect, is a EU vaccine export could trigger tariffs on German cars. So again, there's talk about using smart tariffs as a way to go back to the negotiation and negotiate with the EU where there are being issues being occurred. Next slide, please. So I think it's a huge UK trade opportunity for Romania to the way in which Romania interprets and applies the UK-EU trade agreement. It's a real huge opportunity, I think, to show UK SMEs and the UK government that Romania is open to business with a bilateral trade corridor. And I couldn't resist pulling the Superman. It's almost, there's a chance for, Romania to become a Superman thing with Britain and really encourage that bilateral trade corridor using the UK-EU trade agreement. So I thank you for your attention, and any questions, of course, please feel free at the end to ask them. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you so much, Raymond. It's been great to have both EU and Britain's perspectives in this presentation. Thank you very much. And now we will discuss a very important part as well, the legal side, which often is very discussed and interpreted. But we have here our expert who's going to reduce a discussion on it. Neil, welcome.
Thank you very much indeed, Anna. And if you cannot mind, thank you also to Raymond and Michael for their very extensive contribution so far, and to you for your questions so far. So I now pay bar taxes in 4 jurisdictions: Scotland, England and Wales, Romania and Bulgaria. So fortunately I got here and became a member of the bar before Romania joined the EU, so I think my rights here as a member of the bar are probably grandfathered. So here's our first slide. These are some practical legal aspects. So the very first thing, as you've heard, a lot of work went into negotiating the TCA. And yes, it's not no deal. Some would have said that no deal also wasn't actually no deal, because you had the WTA or WTO, I beg your pardon, rules would have applied if there had not been a TCA. But the important thing to remember is, although you're hearing all about what the TCA covers, this is not the end of the story. It's not even the beginning of the end of the story, to quote Churchill, I think, on that. Next slide, please, Anna. Does it cover everything? Now, in case you're wondering, am I a lawyer giving a piece of advice like that? Well, perhaps I'm not a lawyer. It does not cover everything. That is absolutely clear. So if you think you can find the answer to all your problems in the TCA, I'm sorry, you're going to be disappointed. Next slide, please. So what's next? The thing to remember is the TCA is a starting point. It's a platform. It covers some things, but now we can expect to see additional agreements and arrangements coming to fill in the gaps that the TCA has left. There's always a joke in the UK that if you're waiting for a bus, 2 of them will come at once. Do not expect that to be the case for what comes next on the TCA. You will probably find that little areas are covered in separate agreements, and they may not all come at the same time. There were particular areas, key areas, where the relationship was left open by the TCA. And to make it really interesting, some of these areas require negotiations between the UK and the EU, and others can be negotiated at the level between the UK and the individual EU member state. Next slide, please. Now, one of the interesting things, the EU has a number of free trade agreements with other countries. We know about Canada and similar places like that. And their free trade agreements are in some respects more liberal than the TCA. So I think it's a reasonably safe assumption that one of the objectives for future negotiation between the UK and the EU will be to get the TCA provisions up to the same level that the EU has with other countries. Because after all, why shouldn't they have the same level with the UK if they agree it with other countries? I mean, it's not as if it's any bad blood, is there? So, assuming everyone is sensible and we're all here to make things work and do business, I would expect that you will see that in the future, that if the TCA is not as favorable as some of the other free trade agreements that the EU has, look out for that to be, should we say, upgraded in future years. Next slide, please. Now, business is done by people. And one of the key things is the ability for people to travel. You've heard mention of that from our two other speakers. Now, these 2 points are taken from the Confederation of British Industry's website on the TCA. And just to take you through them, it shows visa-free short-term business trips are allowed for up to 90 days in any 180-day period between the UK and the EU for specific purposes such as attending meetings, research and design, market research, training seminars and trade fairs, purchasing goods or services, taking orders, engaging in commercial transactions, and obtaining outbound tourism services. Further, work visits are permitted for senior business people setting up an enterprise, intra-company transfers to fulfill a contract to provide services lasting no more than 12 months, and for self-employed professionals providing services. Doesn't that sound wonderful? Now, what really happens? I have had, since the start of the year, involvement in 2 particular issues of travel. Now, this is regardless of the fact that we have current problems with COVID and lockdowns, one's coming here apparently in Bucharest quite soon, and restrictions on travel. I've seen they're going to be fined £5,000 in England if you turn up with an airport without a good excuse. So we had a situation in January with a British person coming to Romania to work. I understand that this person arrived at the airport in Romania from the UK with a valid and clear COVID test certificate. And I gather that person's intention was to start work in Romania after an interval during which that person intended to sort out their work permit. Now, given that one can come to Romania on a social visit, as has been mentioned there, COVID permitting, I would have thought the way to deal with this is to say, well, come in, don't overstay your welcome, and if you are going to do some work, don't start until you've organized your work permit. What in fact happened is that despite, can you go back, sorry, you went too far. What in fact happened was that the person was sent back to the UK on the first flight the next morning, despite our calls to the embassy. Now, it's not clear to me whether this is a particular policy or whether it's a particularly overzealous border control officer at the airport in Romania. Just to show it's not all just Romania, I have another situation with a British business person coming to Romania to set up a business in Romania, with a letter from me confirming that this was the case. And the airline, I shan't mention which one, but at Luton Airport, this particular business person was not permitted to board the flight to Romania and was told by the airline official that it was necessary to have an official invitation from a Romanian government authority or from the embassy in London. As a result, this particular person missed the flight to Romania and had to find another way to get to Romania to do business. From my inquiries, what the person was told by the airline is complete nonsense. That said, if you have an hour before the plane leaves and you have an airline official who says that you have to have a document, probably cu ștampile, from the Romanian ambassador or the prime minister or even President Iohannis inviting you to come to Romania, your options are pretty limited. So we go to the next slide, please, Anna. So the advice, I think, is this. There is an expression in English of what's called a job's worth. This is a person who applies the rules as strictly as possible and says, oh, it's more than my job's worth to let you come in and be flexible. So unfortunately, you can't work on the basis of assuming that people in the UK at the border or in Romania at the border are going to be flexible, reasonable, and apply such rules as they have or believe to exist in a way which allows you to come in to Romania and do business. It shouldn't be necessary, but if it's a case of getting a letter from the embassy that says, yes, I can travel to Romania without any kind of official invitation, and getting that sent to the airline, say 7 days in advance, and asking for confirmation from the airline in writing that there's no objection or obstruction to you boarding on the day you intend to fly, get it. Similarly, if you're coming to work here, don't rely upon coming in as a tourist. Make sure you have things in place before you arrive. Next slide, please. So your further information from me is here. I am in Bucharest. And just may giving you doubts that I was really a lawyer by giving you a clear advice that no, it's not clear. The last slide should prove to you that I actually am a lawyer. And the last slide, please, Anna. One more slide. Here we are. Here's a disclaimer that don't rely upon anything I've said here as being legal advice. It's practical advice. Be careful. Do it belt and braces. Don't rely upon people being sensible. So that's my piece. And I know there are lots of questions here. So Anna, over to you.
Thank you, Neil. Indeed, a great presentation. And yes, you are right. We already have some questions in the Q&A. And I will start with the first one. Any of you feel free to answer it. What are some opportunities that might arise to the agreement, and what should business do to be ready to make the most of them?
I just want to back up what Neil's saying. I think it's the belt and braces. I think there are huge opportunities, but the way those are interpreted, it's almost do your homework, do a basic belt and braces approach. So I think there's huge opportunities. I absolutely do. And I think Neil thinks the same, but the practicalities that are happening at the moment, it's just, in effect, detailed planning, belt and brace approach.
I just say to that, it's been said this is a chance for Romania to increase trade with the UK. Something as simple as making sure that the people who control access for business people between the two countries have instructions to interpret the rules in the most, shall we say, user-friendly and liberal way. If that is done, that must give Romania an advantage over other EU countries which do not apply that kind of liberal interpretation to the rules.
And I want to emphasize, backing you up there, Neil, you know, you were talking 10 times the economy of Romania is the UK economy. So, you know, that approach really from a fisherman is a huge opportunity for Romania, and I think for Romanian entrepreneurs and businesses.
If I can just say
opportunities. Yes, Mike, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, Anna. I do think it's a very good opportunity for Romania, and I think, you know, I think that there was a discussion we had once before, you know, about UK businesses coming to Romania. That this is a very good opportunity, and you have to strike hot. You know, you can't leave it another week, another month. You know, there's the quick and the disappointed. And you know, quite frankly, I think, you know, for both Romanian businesses going to the UK, it's a very good opportunity, you know, to be ahead of the game. And as we mentioned earlier, I think Raymond mentioned about Poland causing a few problems. Another good advantage, and we all know that the Romanian employees are sought over. Well, they're fought over even across the world because they're so reliable, intelligent and professional, and well, they're a credit.
Indeed, thank you so much, Mike. I see Steve Surgeon has a question and wants to ask it, so still feel free to verbally say it or just type it in the Q&A box.
In terms of the pandemic, I would say, yes, this is complicating matters. I've just seen today, as I mentioned, that the government in the UK is looking to impose fines of up to £1,000 upon people trying to travel without reasonable excuse. I think aimed at preventing people traveling abroad during the Easter period and potentially bringing back more variants of the virus. So one of the things I think we've all found in this last year, particularly in the chamber, is how effective it can be to do business using online communications and webinars such as this one. So there's another, I would say, thank you very much, Keith. There's another very good reason to stay online and to see that as an opportunity to do business, to overcome the barriers, be they Brexit, be they pandemic, or frankly, be they also a matter of cost and time, because traveling from the UK to Romania, even when you could do that normally, wasn't that cheap and would take a good, certainly for me, if you added in the times to get to the airport in Bucharest and then in the UK, you're talking about half a day gone, if not more. The fact you can all do it now on a conference call very easily, people are available, I think is a huge advantage for business.
Thank you, Neil. I see Steve is here and I think he wants to ask the question. So Steve, feel free to ask it now.
Yeah, hi guys. Thank you for accepting my question. Yeah, we're a UK manufacturing business, and I have an office here in Romania. One of the problems we're having at the moment, which we're working through HMRC with, is as a business we buy in some products from the EU, actually from Italy, but it's a good example for the EU. Now this product is essentially a finished, do a small amount of processing on, we do some additional testing. That product is then brought into our stock and it's sold out to various other businesses in the UK, in the EU and internationally. So it's all to do with rules of origin, and it's been classed that that product should attract duty when we ship it back out into the EU or internationally, because we maybe haven't processed the product correctly, or to class it as UK origin, or we haven't reclassified the commodity code. So yes, we're having a few issues, and this is something that may affect Romanian businesses here that are bringing product in from the UK and possibly circulating back out the EU, out of the EU at a later date. So just wondered if anybody had come across this problem, and yeah, from my point of view, it's a limitation on the trade between the EU and the UK, because it's basically shut down the potential for global business in that relationship.
Can I say I came across a similar issue with a member of one of the other member chambers of the British Chambers of Commerce that was moving goods into Romania, and we had a discussion about whether or not they should incorporate a Romanian company to hold the stock. before it was supplied to their customer in Romania. And after a good deal of discussion and debate, it was decided eventually that the better way to address that was to adopt a much better just-in-time system of delivery, so that the stock was held in the UK and brought to Romania only as and when needed. Now, that suited that particular business. Rules of origin are a very technical area. So many pages are on that in the TCA. My advice is, I'm aware of the tax environment, but I don't advise on it because, in my view, it's a black art. You need to do it with it every day and know how the interpretations are. Talk to an accountant or a tax advisor or specialist on that one. If it turns out that there are problems with the TCA or with the interpretation of the TCA on these issues, then raise it with us, raise it with the embassy, raise it with your Chamber of Commerce in the UK, and we can see whether that can be passed back through to government as an issue which needs to be clarified or adjusted in the further negotiations I've mentioned.
Okay, thank you. I'm actually going through clarification at the moment with HMRC. We're now sort of 4 weeks into that process, so I'm nailing it down gradually. But as you probably know, HMRC are not very good necessarily at giving advice that that they will put a rubber stamp on.
Can I add to that, Stephen? I think it's really important, and back to Neil as well. I think, when it comes to the rule of origins, that's why it's really looking re-evaluation of supply chain, where you have your supplies from. It's really asking for those re-evaluations as well as the authorities kind of catch up with that new dynamic. I believe that's opportunities too, but it is kind of forcing that kind of thought process to really look at the supply chain, sources of supply, and how it's interpreted on the rules of origin is going to cause a real shift in the way people work with their suppliers. So that I think, like you say, Steve, that's both an opportunity and a threat. And it's going to be interesting how it works out as this washes through, I believe.
Yeah. Okay, guys. I'll feed back through through any of the forums with the BRCC. Where we get an outcome and what we've learned from it, because we stumbled across this problem and we thought we were complying with all of the TCA requirements, and it appears that maybe we weren't. In fact, even HMRC, they keep coming back with lots of questions, so I don't think they really know the answer fully to this, and it's all about interpretation again, and we're trying to get an interpretation and get a legally binding statement from HMRC just to make sure that we are fully covered and we are complying with all of the requirements.
And I think also that's a kind of political venue as well. We need this kind of information because we can feed it to the politicians to get some of the officialdom to be more common sense and flexibility, as Neil says, as we work this through.
Yeah,
I can see also a comment from Jim in the chat box, Jim Turnbull. But it's, you're not alone in issues of or practical issues of making the data on country of origin work.
Yeah. It's just a word of advice is that when we actually approached HMRC for a ruling on this, just to tell you the timescales, they came back and said that under our terms and conditions, we're allowed up to 90 days to give you an answer. So as you can imagine,
30 days in Romania, I believe, for a Romanian authority. So that's
Yeah.
shows where Romania is far more efficient in that.
Yeah.
Whether your answer will make any sense is another matter. But
So just a word of warning is that if you're looking at things like this and you want some kind of confirmation from HMRC, is that in theory they have up to 90 days to give a reply, which I found quite troubling, really.
Patience is a virtue.
Yeah, I think it's wearing thin. Thank you, guys. Thanks for taking my questions.
Thank you, Steve, for raising the question and for sharing your experience. Is very useful indeed. As we're running out of time, we will take two more questions. I think Neil already answered the pandemic-related one, so we'll have two. The second is, what does...
Can I do... Yeah,
sorry,
what about
Mike.
students and young professionals?
That one.
Yeah, sorry. Well, I'll answer that one personally, because one of our neighbours is in this position as well, so up in Leeds. So yes, of course it has an impact, but not a major impact as well. And of course, these guys and girls will be able to continue their studies. It's already been paid for and agreed prior to the agreement. Secondly, about travel to and from the UK, well, of course, depends on COVID and the situation there, of course. And as we know, it may improve in May, but we will see. But with travel, as long as they have an authority from the particular university to confirm that they are a student at that particular university, too. Also, there's a type of studies, and of course, the period of time that they're supposed to be at the university. And of course, COVID, as we said, has a big impact on the travel side of things as well, with quarantine both sides.
Thank you, Mike. And our last question is specifically to Raymond. Are there going to be any standardization difference or conditions imposed to the EU companies?
Great question. I think the UK is taking a much more pragmatic approach, and although we've just heard from Steve on the official one, and a lot more political involvement in really tackling this. UK is really looking for a more open arrangement, come do business. So as much as I think the UK will be doing and standardizing its processes with EU companies, they'll be looking for absolutely facilitating trade rather than resisting trade. And also where issues for EU countries are occurred, it's really quite useful to know that kind of information so we can provide it on the political front to really official done to reflect what is political policy, that we're open for business, and certainly for EU companies.
Thank you, Raymond. Do we have any more questions? I imagine you've answered perfectly all of them. I would like to thank you very much for the very informative session you provided for our attendees today and for our Facebook audience, which was a great one. More than 100 people watched you live. I would like to thank again our team for organizing this event. And we're not stopping here. Next week, we're having a very interesting seminar, especially for Romanian companies who would like to launch in the UK market. I will type in our event page where you can learn more about our events and the registration links. And of course, besides event, we also offer consultation services. So if you have any issues or want to learn more, please just directly contact us and we'll definitely support you on this. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here today. And I'm looking forward to seeing at our online event and hopefully soon enough to face-to-face one. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Anna. Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.